Diga, mãe, que eu cheguei. Cheguei, tô chegada, esperei bem esperado. Nessa minha caminhada, sou água de cachoeira, ninguém pode me amarrar. Piso firme na fermente, que caminha para o mar. Em água de se perder, eu não me deixo levar. Andei, andei lá, andei lá. Andei lá, eu já sei o caminho. Andei lá, andei lá, andei lá. Andei lá, eu já sei o caminho. Andei lá, eu nasci e me criei do colo das iabás. Andei por cima das pedras, pisei no fogo sem me queimar. Andei onde mãe Clementina andou e o samba mandou me chamar. Eu faço o que o samba manda, eu ando onde o samba andar. Com a força da minha fé, eu ando em qualquer lugar, na beira do mar, lá no cantoar, no samba jedi, lá no tororó. No cortejo do Bonfim, andei lá. Na festa do divino, cantei pro menino me abençoar. E ainda vou caminhar, andei lá, andei lá. Andei lá, eu já sei o caminho. Andei lá, andei lá, andei lá. Andei lá, eu já sei o caminho, andei lá. Diga, mãe, que eu cheguei. Thank you. It's a samba de roda, come from Bahia, where I came from. The real samba. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robson. That was the multi-talented Robson Lemos, who is a panelist tonight, but he's also a performing artist. So we thank him so much for singing us into this evening. It's a chilly night in Somerville, so we hope you are warm and maybe have something hot to drink or something cold to drink. We're so happy that you joined us. If this is your first time at the Somerville Museum, I want to offer a special welcome. We're so happy that you're here tonight. The Somerville Museum was founded in 1896 as the Somerville Historical Society, and the museum's building was constructed on Central Street in the 1920s. So the mission of the Somerville Museum is to act as a mirror to the city, to reflect back its past and its present. So tonight's event is called Voices from Somerville's Brazilian Community. And this event is part of a Somerville Museum Zoom series called Voices from Somerville, Culture, Community, and History. And it's made possible in part by the National Endowment for the Humanities. And we thank them for their support. So tonight, we're going to hear 4 members of the local Brazilian community talk about their work in Somerville's neighborhoods and beyond, and listen to a historian from Somerville discuss connections between Brazilian and U.S. history. And we're going to have time for questions after that. So as we're going along, if you have questions for any of our speakers, please put them in the chat and we'll collect them and ask them at the end of the evening. So the museum would like to give special thanks to Erlene Tanis, Ada Maria Santos, she's a teacher from the Somerville High School who was recently awarded the Social Studies Teacher of the Year, a statewide award, Jenny Sansorin and Adriana Fernandez for their work to produce this series. Thank you so much. And we'd also like to thank the museum's assistant director, Allison Drasner, who's running the Zoom tonight, and welcome Lady Sains, the museum's new arts and culture assistant. So I'd like to just start the night, you've heard enough from me, by introducing our first panelist, Regina Bertoldo. Regina Bertoldo is board president and one of the co-founders of the Brazilian Women's Group, which has served the Boston area now for 25 years. Regina is also project director of the Somerville Public Schools Enrollment Office. She was named a Somerville Woman of Excellence by the Somerville Commission on Women in 2012. And in 2014, she received an Unsung Heroine Award, a statewide award from the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women. Regina, thank you for all your help tonight in making this event possible. And we're so excited to hear from you. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me. And to see how many, a lot of friends that I recognize the names, thank you. So I would like to start with a warm boa noite, which is our good evening in Portuguese. So happy to be part of this project and participating. So my life here in Somerville started, I moved to Somerville in 1992. I worked at Somerville Hospital for a few years. Then we started with what we called before the Parent Information Center, which is now the Enrollment Office in 1994. At the same time, parallel to it, we started the Brazilian Women's Group meeting informally in 94 when we first opened the Parent Information Center. Heloisa Galvão, who's our executive director of the group, was working on a family literacy project for one of the Somerville early literacy programs. And I'm so sorry. We start meeting informally, and Jamila, who's also in the audience here, was the Human Rights Commission director at that time. We start meeting as a group of Brazilians very informally with the families Heloisa used to meet. There was a tremendous need to get together to talk about our issues, to talk about our vision in our place in politics in Massachusetts. So that's how the group started in 1994. For many, many years, until we incorporated as a 501c3, we never had a real place to meet. So in people's house and wherever we could find a place to meet, other than in my office at the time on 167 Holland Street, we used to get together. The group went on for 25 years. I have been in and off to a couple of years off of the group, and it's still carried on by Heloisa, who's been there for 25 years. And the group is really a huge presence in the immigrant community in Massachusetts. In the meantime, my daughter at that time was 3, who grew up very involved with the group, and we had several girls who are now second generation of the Brazilian Women's Group, and they are all across the country, all involved in different levels of the communities that they live on. Several women in the Brazilian Women's Group also moved on to other parts of the state, of the country, and some are in other countries as well. But every one who was part of the Brazilian Women's Group is involved at their local level in the communities that they are at. So it was amazing the work that the group, how it branched out to different parts, and how that was so empowering to all the women who has gone through the Brazilian Women's Group. in a way that they founded their own groups of the community that they live on. All my work at the Somerville Public Schools, I'm very involved in the community, as a lot of you know, as I work with a lot of you. And it's amazing to work in Somerville, the level of collaboration amongst the groups. It's to be seen in other communities. And I know because I meet with other communities, and you know, different communities speak about the high level of collaboration and partnership in Somerville. I'm also a resident, and it's a place that I call home, that welcomed me. Somerville is very alike my city in Brazil, almost the same size, almost the same history. With immigrants. I'm a second generation of immigrants, Italian immigrants in Brazil. So I share a lot of my immigrant experience with my grandparents who immigrated to Brazil when they were teenagers. Being the only one in the family out of the country, I am proud to say I can sympathize with the experience that they had in Brazil at the time they immigrated, and my experience as an immigrant, first generation, new immigrant. My daughter is the first generation here in Somerville.
Regina, thank you so much. Our next speaker tonight is going to be Josie LaGrosse. Josie is the owner of Josie's Hair Salon on Broadway in Somerville, and her business has served the city for 14 years. And her services include hair, nails, facials, and waxing. And Josie believes, she says, in the importance of making her customers comfortable and doing her best for them. We're so excited to have you here tonight as a business owner, Josie. Thank you so much for coming. I think you're muted.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm so happy, you know. I'm not too good in the camera, you know. Like I say for my friend, I'm too good when I do the hair behind the chairs. You know, I'm so happy I'm here today. Thank you so much. I'm here for like 14 years. I moved into Somerville in 2005, and I started my business 2007. And I'm here, like, I love to be in Somerville. Most all my people is here, you know, my friends, my clients. And I try to live and stay here, but I have to buy a house like in Medford. I don't find a house here, and I moved to there, but I still miss living here. I live here for 9 years. As I love everything here. Like, I love the community, the city, and fortunately, I married my husband. My husband worked for the city too. He is all his life is in Somerville. And I know Robson. I don't know Louisa I see her sometime. I don't see her face to face. My Robson, I know him from Louisa's house. Not the Louisa, not this Louisa. And we have a party together sometime, like I think it's 5 or 7 years ago. I know him. But I'm so happy to be here, okay? Thank you so much. I started my business in 2006. I work for Beto's Hair Salon. And he say, oh, he's tired, he's wanna go back to Brazil, and he's offering me to sell the business. I say, okay. And the time I don't have I have 1,000 in my pocket. And I say, okay. And he say, okay, do negotiation, I buy the salon. And after I change, I put my name. And I'm still here, thank God. And this time, you know, a lot of people close the salon. I have a lot of friends, like have a salon for 20 years and close. We have to say, thank God we're still here and you're still open. But you get a lot of help for the city, you know, the city helps so much. This is one thing you have to say, thank God, too. And this is my life in Somerville.
Josie, could you maybe talk a little bit about some of the people that you serve in the city and maybe what kind of events, like do you do weddings, do you do proms?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, you do prom. Oh, the prom is the crazy weekend. The prom is like when you have the salon bees with the girls, you know, and I love to work with the girls because the girls is like so happy, you know, so funny. Come look for one job, and when you show another thing can be better, can look better, and we do, and the girls be so happy. You do wedding too, and I do a lot of people from the city, work in the city, work with my husband, work with some from the hospital. I have a nurse and I have a doctor. I do the hair too, and like simple person like us, when you see in a salon, you never think as the doctor, you know, but it's like come for do the root. Like today I did for one girl work for the city. She say, Josie, I have work every day. Like I work in a computer, and when I do it like this with my hair and I see the grade, and I say, oh my God, I need to go to Josie. This is one thing, like she say, like, today I come here is my day. I'm happy, you know. You make my day. When I go back home, I look in the mirror and I don't see my grades anymore. This is one thing I love it. I almost close the salon. This is one thing no people like never know. I have a now I have a little problem with my joints. I have arthritis, and I talk to my doctor and I talk to my husband. I'm supposed to close the salon, and I say, you know why? I'm not close. I just cut some hours. Like this, I can work less and still take care of my people. Because I love be hairdresser. I love working Somerville. I love take care, make the girls and all the guys, young guys, boys happy, you know? This is one thing I love to do, be hairdresser.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Josie.
Thank you for having me.
So our next speaker tonight is Robson Lemos. He is a community health worker with the Massachusetts Alliance of Portuguese Speakers, and he's also a local celebrity chef. He often works in partnership with Somerville's nationally recognized Nibble Culinary Entrepreneurship Program. So Robson, he says, believes in the power of connecting people through food and culture. And you heard him sing earlier. He's also the recipient of a Somerville Arts Council grant for his work in the arts and education. So Robson, we're so happy to have you here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to start to say about like where I came from, because I think this will reflect a lot who I am right now. So I am from Bahia. I was born in Bahia, which is the light is good, because I'm losing a little light. That's good, right? Yeah, okay. So I was born in Bahia, which is the first state in Brazil, which have a lot of African influence and also a lot of indigenous influence. So I was born in a town that was very indigenous, and I moved for the capital, that was Salvador, which is a very black. So I have like the whole experience as being a Brazilian. I have like the Portuguese blood with indigenous and also with the black. And this means a lot for me as a professional that lives in Somerville. So when I was 13 years old, I started to do a theater class. It changed my life because I was so shy and so like fear of everything. And my first experience was with the methodology of theater of the oppression, which was Augusto Boal. So his philosophy as an artist, he say, he think like everyone is oppressed. And the only way you can open to create is by breaking the oppression. Oppression about anything, you know? So when I have this experience, I open my heart and I changed totally my life. Before I was a very like afraid boy and submissive of everything. And then I became a very powerful, like empowered person that have like political position, that I speak myself, that I show my heart. So it was amazing. Like theater, when I was 13 years old, changed my life. So anyway, I went to Salvador, which was the capital of my city, of my state. Salvador is very black. And I remember like I was born in a city, like raised in a family that all my brother was like white with like green eyes, and I was the darkest one. And they always say like a little prejudice, they were like, oh, you cannot grow your hair because your hair is curly, things like that. So when I moved for Salvador, I let my hair, Josie, big beijo. So I let my hair grow in Salvador, and I really like, I feel myself like better because I could experience the African influence, and there was like I identify myself like that. I did theater as a graduation in the university, and in 2004, I changed everything. I said, no, I'm gonna move to US because my sister was here for 2 years already, and she fell in love. So I went to the Rio. I did the visa, came here as a student, and my first experience was in a nursing home. Because I forgot to say, in the theater experience, I also start to have experience in a no-profit organization and help a lot of people, like the Black community, the elderly community, like everyone that was needing help in Salvador, the capital. I was like kind of helping and have a lot of experience as a non-profit, like a social worker, I can say that. So anyway, my first experience in US was amazing because it was with old people, like the best English, the best everything. I worked for 1 year in a nursing home in Beverly, and that's how I learned my English. That's like I start to have all the old, very old American culture. In 2008, I visited a friend here in Somerville, and there was a beautiful sunny day in the summer, and I went to Union Square. Marcus Santos was playing drums. So, and I told him that I was an artist, I was an actor, performer, and I have a bow in my trunk. And if he wants, I can open and play with him. He said, please. So I brought a big bonfire in the middle of the Union Square. I take the microphone and I make a big show. So Marcos said that was like the best part in the festival that day. Then I fell in love for Somerville and I moved. That was in 2008. And I never left Somerville. I think because as an immigrant, we always think like people don't like us. We always like afraid. But like Somerville is a city that everyone is welcome. Like for the first time I came to Somerville, I just fall in love. And everything here just so welcome. Everybody like really respect everyone. We have experience to talk. Like I really want to say thank you for sharing. Because the first time I talked to her, she said to me, oh, that's good to hear your voice. And it's not only my voice itself, but like who I am, right? So I feel very happy and honored to be here and talk a little bit about me. So in 2014, I started to work in MAPS, which is a big organization. One of the most important organizations here in Massachusetts is a MAPS, Massachusetts Alliance of Portuguese Speakers. They are here for 50 years, 50. Unfortunately, this year we should like celebrate in the big gala event, but because the pandemic we cancel for next year. But anyway, it's 50 years celebrating the Portuguese speakers. And I'm honored to work there for like more than 6 years. And MAPS was like empower myself so much. Like I need to learn English. I need to do all the reporting in English. I need to have meeting with CDC, with the Center of Disease Control. That's the other thing. In Brazil, when they work in a non-profit, like someone that work in a non-profit in Brazil, they call like agente de saúde, like a health agency. Okay, so there's not a profession, it's not professional. I mean, like they don't go to school for that. It's just learning and experience. But here in America, there's something I experienced that was so positive. Like I became a community health worker and I studied for 2 years about everything in the matter of the social justice, in the matter of like a server community. So I feel very empowered to work in MAPS. We do a program called HIV STI. We do tests of HIV and all kind of STI. If anything comes positive, we bring to the hospital. We link to the health system. So it's amazing. And it's a learning process. We'll have something to learn, classes all the time, Congress sometimes in the United States. So MAPS is amazing. 5 years ago, I started to have experience as a chef. So let me tell you something. Maybe people think, why he does everything? I don't do everything. That's everything that I do as an artist. So as an artist, as an actor, I have a little part of a social worker. I love to help people, and I put my art in everything. As a chef, I also am an actor because I really like to put the food on my body, on my action, in the culture, the identity, and everything. And then I do. For example, in 2 weeks, I'm gonna do Spanish tapas for an event for 10 women, like a dinner for 10 women. So they want tapas. So now I'm learning everything about Spain. So like as a chef, that's what I do. I just dress myself as a chef, and I learn what I'm gonna serve. And there's always with compassion. So I mix everything: love, art, and compassion. I really love to live in Somerville. Thank you.
Robson, thank you so much. Thank you for being here tonight. And so our next speaker is going to be Liliane Paiva. She is a leader from the Brazilian Times, which is a national publication based in Somerville since 1987. And she's also the board president of the Brazilian Heritage Community Foundation, which works to tell the story of the Brazilian community in the United States. Liliane, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's so like empowered by listening to my friends speaking, because they speak about with passion about Somerville, about the experience here with the city. I'm also in Somerville for a long time. I arrived here in '88, the same year that the newspaper started, the Brazilian Times started. And I'm going to speak a little bit about the history of the newspaper's history. And then in talking about that, I'll speak about the community and about my experience in Somerville also. I did a little presentation. See if I can share the screen here. I think it goes. Yes, this is the Brazilian Community Heritage Foundation logo and the Brazilian Times. And okay, this is Brazilian Times, the first weekly Brazilian newspaper in the U.S. And Brazilian Times was founded in 1988 in Somerville by Edison Paiva, a newly arrived immigrant. Edison Paiva is my father, so the newspaper is a family business, and it started on my mother's living room on Summer Street. And when we started, the whole family got involved from the beginning. Not a lot at the beginning, but like my mom, I remember my mom used to deliver the paper. We used to like try to identify and find the Brazilians and go deliver the paper to their homes, because they were not like Brazilian stores back then. And the churches were starting, so we talked to the churches would help deliver the paper, and the newspaper would help promote the services. And the same thing with the first Brazilian stores, and when people had to rent a, like a place or find a job. So we today, like and like for the past weeks, we've been trying to find a word to define how is it that the newspaper grew together with the community. It's like interlaced. I don't know, like it's hard to explain the word, but that's how it is. Like it got like hands together, like with every sector of the community, with the professional sector, with the churches, with the organizations, because we are very involved with everything. So even like talking about how the family was involved, my youngest sister and brother helped deliver the paper since the beginning, and later on I started working with the paper also. So it has been a family-owned and operated business, and today it includes printed virtual presence on the website, webpage, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. It's here. Like we have followers, many followers, and we also just like during the pandemic, when everything was like actually retracting, we never stopped printing. because we always looked up to what other papers were doing, and like the Globe, and what services were they delivering. And we understood that for us to stop the paper would be printing the paper when they did it, would be like a, so the impact would be like a moral impact for the community, was like through the, with the paper and the contacts that we had, we helped identifying people during the, and connect the organizations and put out the word about what was going on, with all kinds of assistance that were out there, but people didn't know how to get it. And also all the information about the COVID, because was, with all the information that was out there, it's very impressive, because so with the internet, there's all this fake news that's still around, and especially at the beginning of the virus, where everything was so uncertain. It was very important to have like reliable sources, with sources of information. So I think that was like a very important point. We kept this magazine. I brought this magazine to the presentation because it's a magazine that we're very proud of, because we had Joe as the mayor, because Mayor Taton always supported the community, like, but supported immigrants in general, not specifically the Brazilian community, but all the, welcome the immigrants in Somerville. And now that Somerville is going through this transition, I say, that has, you know, like brought out like so many like different types of residents, right? Like a lot of immigrants complained about like the city is different, changing, but he's going through the process very smoothly, and have these programs in the city that like they've been looked at like from every city around, you know, the country, because it's so progressive. And we have Summer Viva, for example, that has like in the city, there has community liaisons that speak all the languages. I'm not going to talk about Portuguese only. So, and I know programs with organizations in the city. So that's why, and over here we have our was the last like election, we have like three Brazilian elder women, four, no, three elder women, and Marconi is in Everett, and Priscilla is in Framingham. They are like a city, they're like the school committees, committee elected officials. So it's a magazine that represents how we also grow into politics as a community, and the newspaper is like covering and like very involved with that too, and very proud of it. And then I talked about that already, how we interlaced with the community, and how we got involved with the nonprofit organizations. So we, throughout the years, we always work very closely with the nonprofit organizations, with MAPS. And I had an experience also when I first arrived here. My first official job was with SPAO. SPAO is like, I don't know, like the mother, I don't know, like from you know, from MAPS, because SPAO, MAPS was formed from a merger between SPAO and COPA in Cambridge. So, so I worked for the organization that existed previous to MAPS, doing something very similar to what Robson does now, and actually at the same program, at the beginning of that program and during a pandemic, because it was in the 90s, early 90s. So there was the beginning of like the AIDS pandemic. So talking about the paper, back to the newspaper, we, because of the paper, we started to get more and more involved in the community throughout the years. And as the years passed by, we realized that the community was changing into a next generation of Brazilians, right? And
my father always like he's a historian, and in his like approach to life is very into like he always has an eye, you know, in the history. And even like during the beginning of the paper, he used to talk about like, oh, you're gonna make history, you're making history, you know, for the community. And then when we realized that like we had discussions about like, oh, we move into like you know, like the next generation, how are they going to remember, you know, how are they going to keep in touch with our culture? And of course there's non-profits that do a lot of work, but we wanted to collaborate more with that. And then that's how the idea came about like creating an organization to work with that. And BCH Foundation was created with this idea of the big dream is like to create through the organization a Brazilian museum for the Brazilian history. And so this is how in 2008 we started this event called Brazilian Notable Awards, and there was a way that my father had this idea, and there was a way to he told me that he found to both identify Brazilians, because this organization is like it's like throughout, is working throughout U.S. in the whole country, was a way that the Brazilians would collaborate with us to identify the Brazilians. So we had this awards event where people identify in the local communities, leaders and people who've made a difference in the communities, and they appoint them to participate in this event, and they come from all over the country, and we give the award in New York. And people criticized at the beginning. I was like, oh, why New York? The newspaper actually go to different states, but we are based in Somerville. But New York is kind of more central, and then people wouldn't say like, oh, it's like something like from Boston, and they trying to do something. No, we're based here, but like we give the award in New York. So this way, it's given equally to everybody, and it's non like we're not trying to bring it to our hometown, the whole event, you know. So the Brazilian Times, the magazine, the radio now, and the Brazilian Community Heritage Foundation, they all work together, and we've been working in order to promote our culture, in order to support and contribute with the Brazilian immigrants, both arriving and the ones that are already established here. And we feel very integrated in Somerville, and we're very, very happy to be part of this initiation, this event with the museum, because it's like, for us, it's an opportunity to give some exposure to this dream of one day build a Brazilian museum, and we hope to do it here in Somerville. Thank you.
Liliani, thank you so much. And I'm sorry I got the date wrong. I said 1987, not 1988. So I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
So our last speaker tonight is, we're going to hear a short lecture from Brandeis University historian Dan Breen. He's also a Somerville resident, and he's going to discuss some connections between Brazilian and U.S. history. And some of the panelists heard his talk last week, so we're really happy to be able to present it for everybody here tonight. So Dan, thank you so much for being here.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to all the members of the panel. I'm learning so much tonight, and look forward to hearing from everybody else for the question and answer session a little while from now. But for now, let me see if I can share the screen without causing too much of a disaster. It looked like that worked. So we'll begin with what I wanted to talk about tonight in regard to certain ways that Brazilian history and American history are intertwined. So let me just begin from the beginning here. Here we are with the title. And maybe I should begin with the Brazilian flag, because today is November 18th. And 3 days ago was November 15th. And those stars on the flag that you see before you, the flag of Brazil, represent the night sky on November 15th, 1889, at the time of the first proclamation of the Republic of Brazil. So that as an introduction, let me just point out that today, the United States is the home of more people who were born in Brazil than any other country in the world outside of Brazil. And we're very happy to say that Somerville contains one of the highest percentages of people born in Brazil among cities in the United States, something we're very proud of. But that Brazilian immigration is a relatively recent phenomenon. Throughout most of the 20th century, very few people emigrated to the United States from Brazil, maybe 1,000 a year, 1,500 a year. That would have been a pretty good average until the 1980s. And that's when the military government of Brazil began to spend very recklessly money they didn't really have. And at one point, they were actually printing up money just to afford these very big public works projects. And the result of that was runaway inflation. So that by 1985, the inflation rate in Brazil was running at a good clip of 226%. And what that meant in practice was that if you had 100 cruzeiros, which was the Brazilian currency back then in 1981, you would need 16,000 cruzeiros to afford the same things that 100 cruzeiros would have bought you back in 1981. And that's the way things were by 1985. So with savings drying up, investments not very profitable with that kind of inflation, it's no wonder that many people began to emigrate, especially to the United States. And that inflation was eventually brought under control to some extent in the early 1990s, but that emigration continued. So that today, there are at least 500,000 people in the United States who were born in Brazil. Far more than there were 60 years ago. In 1960, there were only 45,000. So that's quite a significant increase in immigration. And that's why I think it would be really, really good if more people in the United States knew a bit about Brazilian history and all the different ways that our histories are connected. And there's all sorts of things that we could talk about in this respect. So many different stories we could tell. We could talk about this man right here, Emperor Pedro II of Brazil, one of the most remarkable leaders anywhere in the world in the entire 19th century. Not only did he speak 8 languages fluently, not only could he write and read 6 languages more, including ancient Greek, which he read and wrote so well that he actually translated Aeschylus into Portuguese. And he actually was learning Arabic at the time that he died and was in the process of translating into Portuguese the 1001 Nights. Not only did Emperor Pedro have a library all his own of 60,000 volumes, not only did Emperor Pedro of Brazil, Dom Pedro II, contribute to the building of roads and schools and railroads and telegraph wires all over Brazil, but he was also the second foreign leader ever to visit the United States. And if anybody knows the first foreign leader who ever visited the United States, you can put that in the chat. Don't cheat by looking it up. But Dom Pedro, among many other things, when he was visiting the United States, actually took the trolley through Somerville. He actually came to Somerville not long after he walked up the Bunker Hill Monument, all those many stairs. He took the trolley out to where we live. And eventually he became very famous for going to the Philadelphia Exposition, the Centennial Exposition of 1876. And he talked to his friend Alexander Graham Bell at that exposition. And that's one of the reasons that got in the news that the telephone became popularized and would eventually be a great success for Alexander Graham Bell. So we could go on about Dom Pedro II for a long time. And we could even talk about this, the famous failed experiment by Henry Ford to build a city of 30,000 people in the Amazon basin dedicated to the production of rubber. He got permission from Brazil to do that in 1926. 1926, and he put up a bunch of buildings trying to lure workers, but the success was a miserable failure, and all that is left is a few ruins, much like this. They called it Fordlandia, and it is in the Amazon basin. You can go visit the ruins to this day. So many of these stories about our intertwined histories could be told tonight, but I want to tell a story about this man. So that is Getulio Vargas, who was the longest serving president of Brazil of the entire 20th century, and he'll always be a controversial figure because he took power in a military coup in 1930 at a time when Brazil had the opposite problem to hyperinflation. It was the Great Depression. Coffee prices had plummeted from 22 cents a pound to 8 cents a pound by then, really hurting Brazil's export market. And in the midst of the advancing misery, Vargas took power, and he ruled Brazil as something close to a dictator for much of the next 15 years. And there were times when Vargas seemed as if he was trying to turn Brazil into a Mussolini-style dictatorship, although he never went quite that far. And one reason he didn't go quite that far, although, as you can see from this poster here, he was experienced in propaganda and certainly was a bit of a dictator in his own right, was that he really wanted to earn the friendship and support of the United States. What Vargas really wanted to do in the 30s and 40s was try to build up the Brazilian steel industry. And for that, he felt he needed American support. And so, among other things he did to try to earn American support during the Roosevelt administration was he sent us this woman right there. And that's Carmen Miranda, who arrived in the United States from Brazil in 1939. And she soon became known as the woman who saved Broadway from the World's Fair. Everybody was flocking to the 1939 World's Fair at the time, and they were abandoning Broadway, but they all went back to see Carmen Miranda, and she was well remembered in Broadway ever since. She's a bit controversial in Brazil because she's often not thought to be a very good representative of genuine Brazilian art in music and culture, but she was very popular here in the US. And by 1945, she was literally the most highest paid woman in the entire country, based upon IRS statistics. But that was 1945. We're getting a bit ahead of ourselves because we want to go back to Vargas. And one of the big dates in his career in Brazil was also a big date in American history, and that's December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, leading to an American declaration of war on Japan, within the next week, war with Germany as well. Now, as soon as that happened, the United States began seriously investigating a military alliance with Brazil. There had been talks like this for several years, but now they got to be very important. And as a result of those talks, by 1942, Americans had arrived in this city here, which you see on the right-hand part of the map. That's Natal, because we wanted to build a major air base there, which we did in Natal, in the Rio Grande do Norte province, which, as you see in the map, is a bit north of the great city of Recife in Pernambuco. In the air base that Americans and Brazilians built there, it's called a Parnanirum Field, would become the largest air base in the world outside of the United States. And if you think about that map, you can see why. Natal is right there on the Atlantic Ocean in the very narrow waist of the Atlantic Ocean. So it would be very easy to ship supplies from Natal easily across the ocean to Dakar in West Africa, and from there to North Africa in Southern Europe to help the fighting troops. And in fact, Natal was home to 5,000 Americans during World War II. Most of them left after the war, but some of them returned in 2014 because Natal was the setting of a World Cup soccer match between Ghana and the United States. So some Americans did go back. But eventually, by late November 1942, that base was in working order so that the base became known as the trampoline of the Atlantic. So many supplies went over the Atlantic, they called it a trampoline. Now, eventually, the Germans did not like it that Brazil was allying itself with the United States. So German U-boats began to sink Brazilian ships in the Atlantic shortly thereafter. And in fact, dozens of Brazilian ships were sunk by German submarines, at least 36 Brazilian ships that we know of. And one of them was a ship that actually had over 250 Brazilian soldiers on board, and almost all of them died in the Atlantic, sunk by a U-boat. And here's where things get really interesting to me, because with these events going on, Vargas began to believe that the time had come not just to enter the war on the American side, but to actually send troops across the Atlantic to fight in Europe. And his reasoning was that during World War I, Brazil had been an allied power, but they really weren't respected at the peace table because they never committed troops to combat, at least not in Europe. And Vargas decided that if Brazil was to be an influential power after the war, it had to be a genuine and combatant US ally and actually commit troops to the fighting. Now, many Brazilians didn't think he would actually do that. But in fact, he decided to do that. And that meant that when Brazilians said to themselves, a kind of a famous proverb, Vargas will send troops to Europe when snakes smoke a pipe, which is maybe the kind of thing that Americans might say when pigs fly. Vargas will send troops to Europe when snakes actually smoke a pipe. They actually were disappointed in that cynicism because Vargas actually did send those troops to Europe. And he did so to cement this alliance with Franklin Roosevelt, who you can see here. Now, the troops were gathered in record time. 25,000 Brazilian troops were gathered together into a division. They were equipped with modern weapons. And because so many Brazilians had doubted that Vargas would actually do this, they said to themselves, Vargas will send troops when snakes smoke pipes. Those Brazilian soldiers very proudly began sporting one of the most famous arm patches of World War II. And here it is, the smoking cobras, as they were called, a snake smoking a pipe. So they proudly donned the cynical saying that maybe they wouldn't actually go to Europe. And now the smoking cobras, as they called themselves, were actually going to Europe. And in those campaigns, by late 1944, Brazilian troops, by all accounts, fought very well, shoulder to shoulder with American troops in Italy, where they were sent. They fought first in Tuscany, south of Florence, and then a little bit later on, by December of 1944, they were sent to the Apennines, where they had to face off against an extremely well-entrenched German position at a place called Monte Castello. And the weather by now was horrible, December, January of 1945. For many of the Brazilian troops, many of the smoking cobras, this was the first time they'd ever seen snowdrifts. And through the mud, in the cold, in the snowdrifts, they fought slowly but inexorably to take the area around Monte Castello. And this is a part of what that terrain looked like as they were fighting through December 44 to January and February of 1945. Like everything else in the Italian campaign, the going was slow and the going was difficult, but they made it through and they eventually captured Monte Castello. And that was the first step, really the beginning of the end of German power in northern Italy. Eventually, the Brazilians, these 25,000 smoking cobras, would suffer 415 combat deaths, fighting shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. Fifth Army all the way. And they would eventually capture most of the German 148th Division, well over 15,000 German troops. And after the war, many Americans, including Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman, wanted these Brazilian troops to stay in Europe as part of the occupation force of eventually Central Europe, especially Germany. But Vargas brought them home and he disequipped the division. I think he was worried that many of the soldiers, including their officers, might eventually be a threat to his power. But what happened was this experience of fighting for democracy, fighting fascism in Europe, turned many Brazilians even more against Vargas and his dictatorship. And indeed, he ceased being a dictator shortly after the war, and Brazil once more became a republic, and there was a free election in 1945. So with that as one example of the many ways in which Brazilian and American history are intertwined, maybe now would be a good time to turn things back to our panel because we just have enough time for a few questions. So Sharon, we'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thanks for that, all of that great information. It's so wonderful to have a history lecture as part of this event. So we have had some questions for some of the panelists. So I've collected some of them, and maybe Allison, if I don't get to everything, you can ask the remaining questions. So one question is for Josie. So Josie, how did you become a hairdresser? And what was the most challenging thing about starting a business? Someone wants to know. Josie, you're muted.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay.
I can be hairdresser in 1996 in Brazil. And this time, I was working in a salon, I was hairdresser. In Brazil, it's normal, you do hairdresser, nails, and wax. And I do the three. When I get here, I don't have a license for working for do hairdressers, and I start working in better salon. It lets me work in hairdresser and Brazilian wax. I don't have the license for do hair, and it start help me take the license. I have to take my license from Brazil in translation. By this time, when I go translation, is asking me for social security. I don't have in the time. And okay, I started working. And when I buy the salon for him, I buy the salon for him, and he's let me use his license for 3 years. And I hire people for work for me with license, and I'm there, take care and work and help the people and doing everything. After this time, I get married and I get my license, and I go back there and say to the girl, now is my time, give me my license. And she say, oh my God, 6 years later, you come back here for the license. I said, of course, now I have the social security and I'm back. And she's giving me I did the test and she's giving me the license, thank God. And I did. I love my job, you know, I don't know. So sometimes I try to do another thing, but I don't know, I can. I try too many times, but no, I love to be hairdressers. For me, I love to get to, I can show the picture later. Can get one girl with like full hair. I love to work with the girls, like my husband from Haiti. And I have a lot of Haiti girls can come in the salon for me do the hair. Get the hair full and go straight, like the Brazilian keratina. And when the girls look at me and say, wow, Josie, you're amazing. This is for me the best thing. We say in Brazil, you love desafio. I love desafio for me is like, I love the challenge. When I take someone and, you know, I can do my job better.
Thank you so much, Josie. That's
Thank you.
And we have a question for Robson. Someone says it was very inspiring to hear you speak, and they were wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you keep your own creative spirit inspired and how you keep it going.
I love the question. I think the first thing you should think about is your physical thing, because you know we have in the winter, for example, they call winter depression, right? So what I do, I exercise a lot. I walk, I bike, I do always some exercise to make myself like always acting, because if you have like a physical health, is the best thing for you to have good ideas, like for cultivating good ideas. So the first thing, physical activities, good food, always eat very well, sleep well, and meditate. That way, you just like charge your battery and you just explode with a lot of creativities. That's my answer. They have another question that I would love to answer. Is for everyone. Someone asking that if like why all the Brazilians that live in Somerville choose to have the city as your own. For me, in my opinion, is because Somerville is welcome to us. Okay, so every time we have a relationship with anything in Somerville, everything's open for us. So that's why we are here, because we're welcome, and I know that Somerville loves us as well. So it's just like a beautiful relationship between Brazilian and people that live in Somerville. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robson. So Leonie, there's a few questions for you. One is, do you also work as a journalist for the paper, and what is that like? Oh, you're muted, Liliani.
It's very interesting. I do work as a journalist for the paper, but it's actually very interesting because I did work at the beginning, the first years of the paper. Then I didn't anymore because we kind of separated what we did at the paper, and I got in charge of the marketing department. And then with the years, as the years passed, I ended up falling back into that role. So especially with the pandemic, and before the pandemic, actually, with the involvement with the organizations, with the Brazilian Heritage Foundation, but also with the pandemic, yes. It's very interesting. It's a different type of journalism that we do because we not only speak about the facts, but bring a lot of information, a lot of education involved in our news coverage. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And another question, I think you saw it, was someone saw something on Facebook that they felt was misleading and wanted to know if the people that work for the newspaper are hired by the paper, or can other people contribute or collaborate, and how that works.
Yes, I can. I think I responded on the chat. Yes, we have all. We have staff members. We have collaborators and contributors, and on the newspaper, the printed version and the online version of the newspaper, we have more of editorial content. On the Facebook, we bring more contributors, and we are more open for people to put, short stories on their opinions, and there's more expression outside the necessarily the opinion, the newspaper's opinion. And we do with the social media, that's this whole discussion about what is your position and what is like the involvement of our readers or our contributors. So there's much more freedom and democracy on the Facebook as far as like people printing out the opinions. I left on the chat the email for the newsroom and the phone number for the paper. And I told the person that they can get in touch over there, and maybe if it's in a specific situation, we can find out what happened. But and if it was like a newspaper's opinion, or if it was on our contributors.
Okay, thank you so much. And Regina, there's a question for you about what is most rewarding for you about working for the Somerville schools, and what is the biggest challenge?
So I think that the work in itself, it's very rewarding, right? So it's welcoming families to the Somerville Public Schools. So that's my office. It's opening the doors to families. Not only we register students from everywhere, school-age students from pre-K to 12th grade. We also connect families to the healthcare system, to health insurance, to pediatrician's office, to any of our programs in Somerville according to the need. Nowadays, we are online. We were innovative in a way that the pandemic proved that Somerville was a little ahead of time with registration online. We've been online for 5 years. We lost some of that connection with families. However, the families that we most need to be connected with schedule appointments and come to the office. Nowadays, we're doing by phone because they don't have computer access or are not computer literate, and they come and they look for help to register, and that's when we connect them to resources in the city. That's an everyday, very, very rewarding job. And I speak for my whole staff. We have a bicultural, bilingual office where everybody's very engaged in the community with other organizations. Challenging was opening this office with a multilingual capacity in the 90s in Somerville. It was really difficult. We experienced a lot of resistance from the community. The community wasn't ready, so we were just like, breaking barriers to make sure that school assignment was equitable to all, making sure that families made informed decisions about placing their students in school. It took some time. I was not the director then. Then when I became the director, it was really difficult for some families to hear some no's from me. As far as the school assignment, and a lot of times I was like, I need to talk to the supervisor. My people would ask me, I need to speak with the supervisor. And I was like, oh, hello, this is me. But it has been a lot of changes in Somerville, but that was the most challenging, was in the 90s, opening what before was the Parent Information Center, just recently rebranded to the Enrollment Office. Rewarding every day.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Regina. And there's another question for you and for Liliani, and it's, tell us about what the Brazilian community looks like today in Somerville. So Regina, maybe you want to go first since you're unmuted, or?
Yeah, can you ask the question again?
Sure. Tell us about what the Brazilian community looks like in Somerville today.
Very different, right? Different from the 80s, from when Liliani and her family arrived. I came to Somerville early 90s, and I think to connect the community, when in the 90s I worked at Somerville Hospital, and before the Brazilian Foundation in 1988 that was formed, that Liliani mentioned, that was pretty much it as far as Brazilians organizing. Then business start opening in Somerville. Somerville Hospital was one of the few hospitals that had interpreters. Before, there was a mandate in Massachusetts for interpreters in hospitals. That attracted a lot of the Brazilians coming to Somerville Hospital to get their health care. And with that, some businesses start opening, and we got together in a conference sponsored by Somerville Hospital, that a lot of the Brazilian leaders that became Brazilian leaders met on that conference for the first time, also in the 90s. And then we created the Brazilian Women's Group, the Brazilian Immigrant Center, several other organizations. We start organizing. Somerville became an attraction because the amount of Brazilians working in public sectors, businesses. For some of you that remember in the 90s or early 2000s, Somerville Avenue was had a lot of Brazilian businesses. And I think on a mix of immigration and high living cost in Somerville, the Brazilians start moving, and now we see a new wave of newcomers that came in this past 3-4 years, that are families trying to survive, but they rent rooms, and they have the children enrolled in the Somerville public schools. But it's different. We lost a lot of business, which is unfortunately the cost on Somerville Avenue was forbidden for rent, and business closed all throughout Somerville. So gentrification hit our community a lot, and we now have much less in numbers in Somerville, but it is the mobility is very high in these newly arrived immigrants in Somerville. Liliana, I don't know if you want to add to that.
I don't have much to add. Regina said it all. I think we had a large Brazilian community, flourishing Brazilian community in the 90s. It was like very noticeable on Union Square, on Somerville Avenue. And then with the high cost of living and the new developments, and yes, we have much less, and it's a small presence now. And we try to keep this presence on because we do have a history here with the city. And we're very happy with like some situations like with the Nivel Kitchen, what Robson is able to express through his art and practice the Brazilian cuisine. So we do have something that is flourishing there. But in the previous years, we had a lot of business that closed down. So it would be nice to keep seeing more of what we see with the Robson situation, which is like new business. And then we are very happy that Josie stayed. And, you know, like I know Josie too for many years, and I know she's one of the survivors in Somerville, that she was able to manage to stay through the hard times and then assimilate and be assimilated by these newcomers. And she has the clientele now that, you know, it's mixed. It's like the people who are surviving just with the Brazilians. I think those are the ones that were not able to open the doors and like and adjust the services. Were the ones who suffered and couldn't stay. And so we see actually some people coming in, but they come with this mentality that they have to come and adapt. So that's what we see right now.
Thank you so much. And our last questions tonight are for Dan Breen. One is, Dan, if Brazil didn't have immigration, would it still be a dictatorship?
Well, so
Thompson.
I think my
You'd love that.
Oh, Dan, you're muted.
Dan, yeah, I don't know how that happened. Well, it seemed to me that the explanation for the fall of the dictatorship had more to do with examples in Central Europe and Argentina, where all over the place by the early 90s, dictatorships were falling. And Brazilians who are fed up with the misrule of this military dictatorship followed suit as others are doing the same thing at the same time. They have certainly mismanaged the economy. And I'm not sure that immigration had much to do with the fall of the dictatorship. I think there were other factors as well. But maybe my fellow panelists who know more about this than I do could chime in on that.
Well, so Dan, that there's one more question for you, which is what motivated you to learn so much about Brazilian history?
Well, a long time ago, I read the story of Dom João in his famous trip across the Atlantic in 1808 to escape Napoleon, establishing the Portuguese kingdom essentially in Rio de Janeiro. And I thought that image of the entire court, almost 100 ships crossed the Atlantic to escape Napoleon and essentially transferring Portugal to Brazil was such a unique and interesting story that I just kept looking into it. And that's the first thing I remember. I was probably in middle school, so that would be the origin of it.
Well, thank you so much. Well, you know, we've gone 10 or 15 minutes over. And so I think maybe this is a good time to wrap things up, if that sounds good. You know, I just want to thank all of our panelists tonight. It was so great to hear all of your stories and all of your information and experiences, and to add Dan's history perspective at the end. So just the Somerville Museum is so pleased to have worked with you on this event. And we really thank everybody for coming tonight, and also the Somerville Media Center that's going to be rebroadcasting this event. And it's also going to be available on Facebook. So thank you, everybody. And we hope to see you next month. We're going to continue this series and have another one in December. So thank you so much.